welcome to another episode of Tech Talks, the People and Planet podcast. On this episode, I'm joined by Patrick Cresswell. Patrick, hi, how are you?
Hi Lee, I'm very good, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for joining us. So, Patrick, you are the co-founder and managing director of ClearWatt, and your business is all about making life easier for those people that are buying, selling, and owning electric vehicles. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Making their life easier, but also helping to shore up confidence in the market to begin with.
Okay.
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit more about the overriding problem then that you guys solve with the company mission. Um, how you were inspired to do that?
sure. So ClearWatt is all about, as mentioned, firming up confidence in the second-hand electric vehicle market. So what we've done here is some years ago we saw what was happening with EVs, and at the end of the last decade, it sort of moved on from early adopters into a much more of a mass market proposition, helped along by tax incentives for company car drivers and salary sacrifice and things like that. And you saw lots of new businesses spring up around those sort of themes. And what we saw coming was big volumes of electric vehicles, which in a couple of years' time are going to find themselves on the second-hand electric vehicle market. And that posed some questions, having worked in this sector for a long time now, some real questions about what is the market for that? What does it look like? What are the concerns of people within it? And so that's the kind of background. You do a bit of digging into this topic and quite quickly get to the subject of battery health and not exclusively to used EVs actually, but more broadly question marks around range and actual performance of vehicles. And so we set out on a path to deploy some software to help consumers who are considering buying an EV, considering used. It's where 80% of all cars are bought and sold, is on the second-hand market. It's it's where affordability kind of lives. But knowing that there are these challenges around battery health, range, and how is this car actually capable of performing? What will it perform like in the future? What will it be worth in the future? ClearWatt has been built to assist on all of those challenges.
Nice. Okay. And so is there, is battery health the biggest concern, do you think, for EV drivers? Because obviously range is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and somewhere in a pitch deck we've kind of got a Venn diagram of concerns, but they're right up there. As there's a lot of research into this area. Auto Trader quote it as a top 3 issue, usually behind price and lack of charging infrastructure, as you can imagine. Yeah, so it's a major issue. The Green Finance Institute also conducted a study last year. They interviewed 2,000 people, including dealers and consumers, and found that 62% of people who were otherwise considering buying a used EV are pausing that decision because of battery health concerns. And it's quite interesting when you speak to Auto Trader, as we do on a close sort of basis. A lot of their data shows that on the surface, the used EV market looks to be flourishing if you base that entirely on search. So at the very top of the funnel at Auto Trader, you've got an awful lot of people who are considering buying a used EV. But as that funnel goes down, the conversion rate is really poor and much worse than it would be for internal combustion. And clearly what that shows you is throughout that decision-making process, concerns, challenges of being thrown up. And I think you can just well imagine, your average person who, well-meaning, wants to do this, knows that they're going to have to go electric soon, wants to get a second-hand EV, but you can well imagine just at the point of pulling the trigger on that, it's quite tempting to think, what, I'll wait 3 more years. I'm not quite confident about this, and so that's kind of the current state of play across the market.
Okay, so the ClearWatt platform then makes the consumer have a more informed decision. Is that right, of how they want to proceed?
Yes, that's right. Because what we've built is a completely independent test that anybody can do on any electric vehicle in order to prove what condition it's actually in terms of range, and from that you can draw estimations around battery health. So the ClearWatt product is basically a mobile telematics device. So sorry, that makes it sound as if there's a separate device. It's a mobile telematics unit which uses the mobile phone of the customer. So there is no additional hardware, which is something that we prioritized very early on in the product design and product development phase, because having spoken to industry, some of whom are selling, you know, four-figure volumes of cars every day,
Yeah.
when those vehicles are electric, they can't have the burden of a battery health test at that point. You know, operationally it just doesn't work. So we've built a system which is entirely mobile, and the proposition is that the seller organizes somebody to do the test. Usually that would be a leasing customer at the end of their three-year lease period, who typically are sent an email a couple of months before asking them to do X, Y, and Z and get that car prepared for return. This will be one of those X, Y, and Z points. And so when that car arrives back to the fleet or the leasing company or whoever, they've got eyes already on what condition the battery is in, and the report that ClearWatt issues them is then used throughout that chain of resale. So typically the next person in that chain will be an auction house. Then after that, you'll have dealers who attend that auction, buy cars, and then sell them through their own channels slash third-party channels like Auto Trader as well, where they'll advertise them. And the ClearWatt proposition is that everybody in that chain, including of course the end consumer, has eyeballs on how that car is actually capable of performing, and therefore what it's worth relative to other identical vehicles.
Like it. Okay, so there's multiple problems I think that this is solving. The first is the environmental thing, because if you're saying that lots of people, it sounds like, are thinking, I quite like the idea of an EV. Let's have a little, look around online.
Yeah.
Ooh, it seems a little bit. Oh, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure. But if they had something verified from you guys, that might answer a lot of the questions about them, and they might actually get to the bottom of that funnel and actually, excuse me, commit to getting one. So of course, better for the environment, but I guess also if you're looking at a financial wellness point of view as well, you know,
Yeah,
people like,
absolutely. The environmental case is absolutely there, because you know, one of the motivations for doing this is that I completely understand why it's sort of ended up in this way, but electric vehicles are in some quarters considered to be quite akin to sort of fast fashion almost, in that you know, the newest, shiniest, you know, that's a lot of the lingo. And you know, I was just at a big conference at the Excel Center last week, and that's exactly the theme, you know. And of course, with an emerging tech where, you know, there's breakthroughs happening all the time, you can understand that. But for the environmental case to stack up for electric vehicles, they need to be on the road for some time, right? So, you know, it's not as if they can just be discarded at the end of 3 or 4 years. We need to be looking at them as a 10, 20 year, even more perhaps, assets on the road. And I think in order to do that, people need transparency on what they're worth and what they're buying. And the current state of play is that you know, you would sit on a classified website looking at, you know, perhaps you've got 3 tabs open. Let's say you're looking at 3 identical cars, make, model, year, mileage. The variance in performance of those cars could be a 20, 30, 40% swing on the basis of how that car has been treated by its first owner or few owners. And currently those cars would be priced almost identically, because there's no visibility on this stuff. So for the long-term view on electrification, it's really important that battery health is properly understood.
yeah, 100%, definitely. What's your background then? How do you arrive at ClearWatt? Share a little bit more for the listeners.
Sure. So early background for me is that I'm from a very car heavy, motorsport heavy family, and so always been interested in automotive. I think for me, my interest in technology has sort of been sort of, it grew at the same pace really, and so rather than work for my family has a mechanical engineering business in the world of motorsports. Rather than me do that, I sort of set myself up and moved down to London and quite quickly became part of the original management team of eCar Club, which was a car sharing business, which was a concept that I loved anyway. It's like a really smart use of sweating assets, like, you know, the sort of zip car model. But eCar Club was an entirely electric car sharing business. So as well as having multiple users per car and taking cars off the road, therefore, the fact that they were zero emissions at the tailpipe had a bunch of other benefits, obviously. And I worked there from around 10 years ago, ended up taking it over as managing director. The company sold to the Europcar Mobility Group. I worked at Europcar for a couple of years, helping them to integrate the business and redirect some of their thinking on some of this sort of urban mobility electrification stuff. But ultimately, the gap that I saw in the emerging second-hand EV space, tied with this, I guess, the entrepreneurial itch once more, let's say, led to the foundation of ClearWatt.
And how long have you guys been going? A couple of years now, is it?
3 years, yeah.
3 years, okay. Which kind of leads me to the next question. I mean, a lot's happened in that time. What challenges have you had to overcome, and how have you done that?
Yeah, I mean, it is challenging. I think you know, you'd have to be blind to not see the shift in sentiment towards electric vehicles, which does make things a little bit tricky. To me, I always think that those shifts seem to be quite aligned with petrol prices and electricity prices. I think back in the sort of early part of this decade, where domestic electricity and gas was still low, it was like before Ukraine happened, and petrol was relatively high. EVs had quite broad support, so I think it's fair to say. But when that pendulum swung, you saw a lot of the things that need to improve about EVs became that argument became much louder, I think, as they became more expensive to run. And so you know, it is a challenge. It's not something that we obviously believe is a long-term challenge. I think you know, the horse has bolted on electrification as far as we're concerned. But certainly it's not helpful in conversations to be sort of starting them with that as the topic. There's an awful lot of stuff that an awful lot of smart people are trying to solve, and a lot of that just gets in the way.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Uh, What comes next for you guys? What have you got in the offing this year that you can share with us?
So we are currently fundraising. Obviously, I'm sort of always fundraising to some degree, but we're actually on the cusp of a public crowdfunding campaign, which is great. We've won 2 Innovate UK innovation projects for this year.
Oh,
Excuse me.
nice.
Yeah, I can't say too much about one of them, but the other is all around using AI and machine vision to identify the diameter and design of an alloy wheel. You might wonder what that has to do with us. Well, the answer is quite a lot, because part of our test is to understand the benchmark range capability of the vehicle that we're testing, and a lot of that is determined by the wheels it's sitting on. In that, you know, there's some EVs out there where you're in a configurator on a manufacturer website and you can choose between, let's say, 18 and 21-inch wheels. The range drop that you can expect from some of the bigger wheels, if they're not sort of aero designed, can be as much as like a 5% range drop. So it's quite significant over hundreds of miles. So yeah, we're doing some real, like, novel bleeding edge innovation stuff, which is super interesting. And at the same time, in parallel, we're scaling up the team, because we're heading towards a full commercial launch by the end of this year. So at the moment, we have a few very interesting partnerships and pilots underway. We're live with Octopus Electric Vehicles, Motability, and others. And yeah, as we formalize full integration with those types of partner and extend beyond that, we're heading towards a full commercial launch by the end of this year. So
Fantastic. So are you going to launch this specifically as a B2B product?
So our proposition is primarily B2B2C in
Yeah,
that ultimately the party that cares and the party that sees value in the ClearWatt report that you're issued at the end of the test is the consumer. So
yeah,
there's the C, right? But most of the people selling EVs are businesses. Roughly 2/3 of EVs that are sold in the UK go to fleets and business. So they're the people selling them. So our channel is to work with those partners to get cars certified, and that certification be presented throughout the resale process. So therefore, B2B2C.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
that said, we're again, one of the core tenets of the product design was that you don't need to be technical to do the test. So there are private consumers who own EVs outright and are planning to sell them this year, and they can absolutely use the system as well. So it being possible for everybody to use is quite. It's not just a convenience; it's quite an important part of the whole proposition, because when we look to integrate with classified websites, for example, and others, we want there to have been a level playing field in terms of how all cars could have been tested to begin with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you know, if I was to lease a car from Octopus now, would I be able to use your product now?
So we're not at that phase in the pilot. So Octopus Electric Vehicles founded in 2020 and really kicked off in earnest in 2021. So the vehicles that they leased out in 2021 are now 3 years later beginning to return to them. So so what we're working with them to hopefully see quite soon is, as those vehicles go through the resale process in the way that I've outlined before, they will carry ClearWatt reports.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, yeah, looking forward to that becoming more of a thing later on this year. So commercial launch by the end of this year.
Yes, that's the plan.
Fantastic. Patrick, thanks so much for joining us. Guys,
Cheers,
this is
then.
Patrick Cresswell, Managing Director of ClearWatt. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.